righty. Thank you so much for being here. I see Linda has joined us too. We know you have busy schedules, so we're glad that you took some time out to tune in. And Tyler is here. Thank you. My name is Rachel Hillier, and I'm the Assistant Director of Prevention and Safety and Grants here at ISD 728. And we're excited to bring you another session in our parent education series. And this one is entitled Growing Better Behavior. And I'm looking forward to this information because I have found myself over the last couple of weeks and months, as you may have too, kind of uttering the words to myself, parenting is hard. It's been a hard time. And we wanted to give you some information here about how we can do the best we can navigating this new world each and every day and during this ongoing pandemic. And so these sessions are designed to put more tools in your toolbox. So I'm pleased to introduce you to two of our in-house experts here at ISD 728, both of whom have the role of behavior analyst. And they are on our staff, and they serve students district-wide who are receiving special education services. So Joel Christian and Nikki Tackley. And let me tell you a little bit more about each of them. Joel has been with the district for 7 years, and Nikki has been here for 2 years. So in addition to their time spent in the district honing their skills on behavior, both came to us coincidentally with an education from St. Cloud State University. So their professional experience as well has kind of augmented that education. And Nikki had previously worked for an autism agency, and Joel was employed at a hospital serving people with traumatic brain injury. So that also enters into their work here. Joel and Nikki currently in our district host a behavior blog for our ISD 728 staff, and it's filled with just a ton of wisdom. And we asked them to spread some of this important information with all of us. So I want you to know this session will be recorded, and we invite you to ask a question. You can add it to the Q&A feature, or I believe the chat function is open as well. We won't be able to get to all questions most likely, so we will document those and post those on our website along with the recording so that you could access this information later, or you can share it with friends who weren't able to attend. So what I wanted to do is make sure we introduce Joel and Nikki, and then I'm going to turn it right over to them to share what they know. Thank you.
Before I shift it over to them, I just wanted to make one mention. If you are interested in getting a CEU for today, I will be putting a word into the chat box, one in about 15 minutes and one in about 35 minutes or so, or just depending. And then you'll just send me those words with an email to me and I can get you the CEU. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to it.
Right, thank you for having us, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to be able to talk about our favorite subject, behavior. We know that trying to understand your child's behavior can sometimes be a very difficult thing to do, and we hope that today we will be able to give you some tools that you can use when your children or students are having some challenging behaviors. Today, we're going to be discussing 4 main topics: behavior is communication, understanding the why behind behavior, factors that impact behavior, and finally, steps to success. Before we can start talking about what to do with a challenging behavior, it is important to first think about what is the behavior trying to tell us. This is like getting ready to plant something. Before we can begin the process of planting and growing, it is helpful to know something about what it is we need to make sure the plants and seeds are going to grow. So the first thing we're going to cover is behavior is communication, because this can help us understand what it is we need to grow better behavior with our children. When your child or student is yelling, crying, or not following your directions, they're trying to communicate something with you through this behavior. So if your child or student has a challenging behavior, their challenging behavior is communicating to you that they have some sort of problem with the situation. Challenging behavior can certainly look and feel like something else. When we're in the store and our kid has a tantrum because they want some candy that just so happens to be placed right at eye level at the checkout lane, it feels like they're being naughty or bad. But if we take a step back and think about the situation, all that our kid is trying to do is communicate with us that they want some candy. When our kid is angry and storms into their room and slams the door and yells, "I hate you," it can feel like our kid is being mean and disrespectful. But again, if we take a step back and think about the situation, it is likely that all our kid is trying to do is communicate that they want to be left alone. Our students and kids generally don't have challenging behaviors when they're getting what they want and when things are going their way. They may get frustrated with a game that they're playing, or they might get angry about something they see on social media. But the behaviors we're going to be focusing on today are more closely related to you and your interactions with your child. The same is true for us adults. When things aren't going our way, when things are going our way, we tend to not have any challenging behaviors. If we like coffee, like myself, and we're able to enjoy our coffee, life can be a little bit better, and we tend to not get as angry or frustrated. And we tend to be a bit happier if we don't run into much traffic on our way to work. And again, when things are going our way, tend to be in a better mood. We tend to be more patient and understanding with other things that happen in our day. Challenging behaviors tend to occur when there are problems. For our kids and students, this could be when we ask them to stop doing something that they want to keep doing, like asking them to turn off their game and get ready for dinner. Or it could be a situation where we ask them to do something that they don't want to do, like asking them to clean up their room before they go to the friend's house. This also tends to be familiar for us as adults. For some people, when they don't have their coffee in the morning, this is a problem that tends to cause challenging behaviors because we tend to get angry or irritable. When we don't have our coffee, we're more likely to honk our horn and say some choice words if someone cuts us off while we're driving to work. Most people have heard of the term hangry. This is when we're so hungry that we get angry or irritable. When we're angry or irritable, we might avoid interacting with our kids, or we might be more quickly to scold them when they're doing something wrong. There are two main things challenging behavior can communicate. The first thing that behavior tends to communicate is "I want." Maybe you notice times when your child or student is doing a challenging behavior because they want something. Some things that our kids and students commonly want are attention from you or someone else, or maybe they're communicating that they want to use some technology, or maybe the challenging behavior is communicating that they simply want a snack. The other thing that challenging behavior can communicate is "I don't want." Some of the things they commonly don't want include: "I don't want my vegetables," "I don't want to listen to anything you have to say," or it could be communicating that "I don't want to do my homework, clean my room, hear a particular noise, or stop playing my video game I'm playing." A challenging behavior may also communicate a sensory need, such as sensory overload or the release of unwanted feelings. Behaviors related to a sensory need tend to be a bit more complicated, so if you suspect your child or student's challenging behaviors are related to a sensory need, it may be helpful to find some additional supports to help you and your child better manage these situations. Children use challenging behavior as a way to communicate because, one, they don't have better tools to say what they want or need to say. For example, they don't know how to ask for the cookie that they want, or they don't know how to tell the caregivers that they want to leave grandma's house. So instead, they engage in challenging behaviors to communicate these things because they don't know how else to get their point across. Another reason children may use challenging behavior to communicate is because they have learned that they can get their message across more effectively when they use the challenging behavior. For example, if a child knows that whenever they have a tantrum in the store, they get the chocolate milk that they want, of course they're going to throw a tantrum next time they're in the store because they know that it will gain them access to that chocolate milk. To them, it's an effective form of communication. However, to us, it might not be the most appropriate. So what else could it look like if your child or student is trying to communicate to you that there's a problem? Well, maybe a particular behavior is happening more often, or perhaps the challenging behaviors are becoming more intense than usual. Sometimes it's when we see new challenging behaviors pop up that we haven't seen before, or perhaps it's a change in their normal patterns or routines. The important thing to remember is that all challenging behavior is a communication that there is a problem. In addition, we should consider that just because they're not actually saying anything doesn't mean there's not a problem. Some children completely shut down and do not want to discuss the issue. This behavior is communicating something just as important as any other challenging behavior.
When we begin to see our kids and students' challenging behavior as communication, we can then begin to think about why the challenging behavior is happening. Certain plants don't grow very well in Minnesota, and some plants need more sunshine while others need more shade. Knowing this information helps us to make a plan for growing whatever it is that we want to grow. The same is true for challenging behavior. The more we understand why that behavior is happening, the better prepared we can be to make a plan for change. Understanding the why is much like preparing the soil before we plant our seeds. We wouldn't expect a plant to grow very well on rocky terrain, nor would we expect much to grow in a desert. Of course, things still grow in rocky areas and things still grow in the desert, but neither of these places are the best for encouraging growth. Just as every plant has different needs to be able to grow and flourish, the same is true for our children. They also have different needs to be able to grow better behaviors and to flourish at home and at school. When we begin to understand why a behavior is occurring, we begin to see just what is needed to create an environment where we can help our children and students grow better behavior. It can be really difficult to be a parent in today's world. Sometimes it's enough just to try to manage the stress in our own lives. When we're dealing with some challenging behaviors in our kids or students, and we're feeling like we've tried everything and nothing seems to work, it can leave us feeling exhausted, unsure, or maybe even a little bit like we should be doing better. Sometimes, when we get to the point where things just seem to be getting worse, no matter how hard we try, we end up reacting to the challenging behaviors. We call this chasing behaviors, where it seems as though we're running to put out one fire after another. Anytime that we get into this pattern, not only does it tend to wear us down, but your child's behavior is learning that they have control of getting the things that they want and not having to do the things that they don't want to have to do. There are times when chasing behavior is absolutely necessary. If our child is about to cross the street and they don't see the car approaching, we're going to react to keep our child safe. I'm not really concerned about the why because their safety is much more important. But if we're dealing with a situation where safety is not our main concern, we should try avoiding chasing the behaviors as much as possible. To break the cycle of chasing behavior, it can be very helpful to think about why the behavior is occurring. This can be difficult to do when we're feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, or even angry about their behaviors. When I start having those similar feelings, I try to remind myself that this challenging behavior is a communication, and that the person is trying to tell me something through their behavior. In these situations, I try to stay curious about what the behavior might be trying to tell me, because if I can figure out what that behavior is communicating or telling me, I have a much better chance of understanding the why behind the behavior and knowing what to do to help the situation. For example, let's say your child is hiding under the table at home or under her desk at school. Our first reaction to this challenging behavior might be to try to persuade them out, or maybe we scold them to try to get them out, or maybe we even tell them that they're going to lose their computer or phone privileges if they don't come out. All of these reactions are examples of chasing the child's behavior. As long as you and your child are safe, you have some time to hold off on reacting to the behavior and take some time to see if you can figure out the why behind the behavior. So how do you figure out the why behind a challenging behavior? There's a few things that you can think about that will help you figure out the why behind your challenging behavior and help you understand what they're really trying to say. The first thing you can think about is what was going on when the challenging behavior first occurred. As we discussed earlier, challenging behaviors don't occur unless there's a problem. Knowing what just happened just before the behavior helps us understand more about what the problem actually was. We can then understand the problem and think about making a plan on how to help them be more successful. Another thing you can do is to pay attention when the behavior occurs. Challenging behaviors tend to follow certain patterns, so if you can find a pattern, you can quickly narrow down the reasons that the behavior is happening. Some common patterns to look for are the time of day, or maybe it's certain activities like chores or homework or after playing a video game or watching something on YouTube, or maybe it's before or after meals. We can also try and pay attention to where the challenging behaviors tend to occur. We might ask ourselves, are the behaviors happening more at home or at school? Are they taking place in situations where there are crowds of people or where there are quiet environments? Maybe the behaviors only occur around certain friends or after certain events or only when they use social media. Again, we're trying to find any patterns in the challenging behavior so we can be more confident in understanding the why. Finally, we can think about what else could be impacting the situation. Maybe your child is tired because they were up all night playing video games or watching TikTok videos. Maybe your child is hungry because they missed breakfast. There are unlimited possibilities of things that might impact the situation. Some other things that commonly impact our children and your students' behaviors are the side effects of medications, or perhaps something happened earlier at school, or maybe the things that they read on social media are making their behaviors more likely to occur. Since just about anything can impact a challenging behavior, it can be very helpful to just stay curious about your child's behavior to see if you can figure out all of the things that are having an impact.
Next, we will talk about factors that impact behavior. This is one of my favorite quotes. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. Similar to the flower, when a student doesn't thrive, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the student themselves. When plants do not get enough sun, water, and are not in an environment that is supportive of them growing, they typically do not do well. Kids also need to have the right conditions in place to do well. When the right conditions are not in place, they may begin to engage in challenging behavior to communicate that there's a problem. Let's think about an example. Let's say your child is tired all the time because they're up late, interacting with friends on social media. Being tired at home and at school is not going to help your child manage their emotions and behaviors when difficult situations happen. In fact, because they're tired, they're much more likely to do challenging behaviors because we all tend to be easily disrupted and on edge when we're tired. Being tired is like our plant not getting enough sunlight to grow. In order for a plant to thrive, it must have sunlight and water on a consistent and regular basis. The same is true for your child. In order for them to be as successful as possible, they're going to need regular sleep on a consistent and regular basis. There are two categories of things that impact behaviors: contributing factors and triggers. Contributing factors are things that make challenging behavior more likely to occur. And triggers, on the other hand, triggers are things that immediately trigger a challenging behavior. Let's look at some examples of each. Some contributing factors that could make challenging behavior more likely to occur for your children are being tired, hungry, sick, being stressed from the pandemic, social unrest, sick family members, and the side effects of medications. Things that might immediately trigger a challenging behavior for your child are transitions, such as getting ready to go grocery shopping, changes in their routine, demands such as chores or homework, siblings pushing just the right buttons, removal of a preferred item, such as the iPad or video games, and simply being told no. In addition, we as adults also have things that trigger and contribute to our challenging behavior, and it is helpful to be mindful of these things. Here are some examples of each. Some contributing factors that can make you more likely to engage in challenging behavior are stress from finances, wanting to keep kids safe and loved ones being sick, working from home, unemployment, kids distance learning, and everyone being cooped up inside. Some triggers that might immediately trigger a challenging behavior from you include kids acting up or not listening, watching the news, losing a job, or the Vikings losing. Every day, we all experience different triggers and contributing factors. In fact, they happen more often than we think. Think about the last time you had to wait for a train on your way to work or running an errand. Waiting for the train probably triggered some behavior. Seeing the lights come on and the safety arms come down might have triggered you to make a comment like, "Not today," or "It's just my luck." Once stopped, you probably looked around and saw your phone. Seeing your phone triggered the behavior of picking it up, looking to see if you had any messages. Being so close to a fast-moving train could have triggered some feelings of anxiousness or worry as you saw the train quickly approaching. Waiting for the train probably contributed to some behaviors. Waiting for the train made it more likely that you called to tell someone that you're going to be late. Being stopped for several minutes made it more likely that you looked at your phone to check for texts, emails, or Snapchats. Waiting for the train also might have contributed to you becoming nervous about being late to something. Or are you getting a little bit nervous because you're so close to a train moving very fast in front of you? All of these contributing factors can impact our own behavior and how we interact with others. In addition, when our students and children are struggling with a challenging behavior, it can trigger many things within us. We can feel angry, sad, ineffective, and overwhelmed. Most often, us adults have learned some strategies to manage our own behaviors when things become difficult or stressful. What our students' challenging behavior is telling us is that they don't have good tools or strategies to manage whatever is difficult for them. We can certainly let our students learn from their own actions. Sometimes this is called the school of hard knocks, natural consequences, or we might say something like, well, that's what happened when you don't follow the rules. Most of the time, it is a better approach to help our children and students by teaching them a better way, giving them the different tools to use, or providing them better resources to grow a new or better behavior.
Next, we're going to discuss some ideas and strategies to grow better behavior. Before we start thinking about changing our kids' behavior, it can be helpful to think about what we bring to the table that might be impacting our success. This is especially true when we're faced with a situation where we have little or no success with challenging behaviors. Oftentimes, our reaction to a challenging behavior is based on our experiences when we were kids. Many times we hear ourselves saying things like, well, that's what my parents did and I turned out okay. Well, just because things were effective for us doesn't always mean that it's always the best approach. When I was a kid, we had rotary phones. Sure, they worked just fine, but I can tell you that dialing a number using a smartphone or just telling my phone to call someone is certainly a better and more efficient approach to calling someone. So just because things worked for you when you were a kid doesn't mean that there might not be better or other ways to help our children to succeed, even if those ideas make us feel a little bit uncomfortable once in a while. Another thing that we tend to bring to the table is how the challenging behaviors are impacting how we respond. Nobody enjoys dealing with challenging behaviors, and when they happen, they tend to put us in a bad mood, which results in us reacting in ways that are not very positive. Sometimes we scold our children for their behaviors, or we take away their privileges, or we might send them to their room or put them in a timeout. These types of strategies can be effective in the short term, but over time, these strategies tend to lose their effectiveness and will usually cause the challenging behaviors to get worse. Maybe you have experienced this with some of the strategies that you've tried in the past. A common example of this is when we take away some privileges when we see the challenging behavior. In the beginning, our children tend to respond pretty well, and we feel that this approach was pretty effective. But what often happens is that our children and students quickly learn how to push the boundaries with more and more behaviors, and we respond by removing more and more of those privileges. The end result is usually a situation where there are a lot of big behaviors and we run out of things to take away. On the other hand, strategies that are more proactive and positive tend to work better in the long run. The main reason is that these are more effective is because we all tend to like it when there are more positives happening in our day. A few weeks ago, I was driving from Zimmerman to Rogers and I didn't have to stop at one red light along the way. I was pretty happy because I wasn't late for my meeting and ended up telling several people about the near miracle that happened in my day. Think of the last time that something positive happened to you and how good that made you feel. This is how we want our children and students to feel when they're learning something new. And the only way to get them to feel this way is to use positives to grow better behavior. Some things to consider to be more positive include using a reward chart for younger children. Reward charts are nice because you can make a simple chart with a piece of paper and a pen or pencil. This reward chart shows you the expectations on the left-hand side and the days of the week across the top. These charts are helpful because they show our children just what is expected of them each day without me having to constantly remind them of what to do. When they complete the expectation, we can add a sticker or draw a check mark to let them know that they did well. These charts help to make our expectations clear and also help our children to see when they have met the expectations and when they have not. For older children, a simple checklist can provide the same information as a reward chart, but it's a little more age appropriate. There are a couple of things to consider when using a reward chart or checklist. If your child or student isn't being successful with the expectations, we should go back and think about why this might be happening. Maybe your child or student needs a little extra help in understanding the expectations, or perhaps the reward is not exactly worth the effort. Few people are going to put in a full day's work for a $5 paycheck. Your child's behavior may be communicating that very same thing. So sometimes we need to make sure that the reward is worth the effort to them. There are 5 steps to success when creating the right conditions for better behavior to grow. The first is to be curious. Instead of just reacting, try to figure out the why and try to remember how we interpret things as adults is different than how our kids may interpret things. For example, if we as adults overhear a COVID statistic on the news, we may just brush it off and go on with our day because being in the pandemic for a year, we've learned how to cope when these stressful statistics are thrown our way. Your child, however, might overhear the same statistic and have a very different reaction. They might not be able to comprehend how many 120 people dying in the world really is. They may feel a little hopeless and panicked that the epidemic is out of control. The same difference between adults and children can be seen with changes in routine. As adults, if we have a meeting pop up on our schedule, it might be very frustrating to have that short notice. But again, we've learned how to handle our emotional reaction and we've learned how to handle unpredictable situations. Our children, though, have not had a long time to learn how to handle these similar situations. If they have a change in their day or schedule, say maybe it's a substitute teacher, they might have very strong emotions and also very strong behaviors in response to this change. This is because they have not learned how to handle these changes in their routines. Another thing we can do is to encourage routines and consistency. When our children and students know what is expected of them ahead of time, it can reduce some of the challenging behaviors. Sometimes we think it can't possibly be a surprise, especially when we feel like we're doing the same routines day after day. This is where it's helpful to go back and think about what the behavior is communicating. It's not about what I think, it's about what is happening from your child's perspective. What is happening is that your child or student's behavior is communicating that there's a problem and that they don't have the tools and skills to manage that problem. This can be like planting the seeds to grow better behavior. The more that our children and students know what is expected of them, the more they will be able to take some roots in their day. Once we have created an environment where the behaviors we want to see have taken root, we can start adding some other things to encourage some additional growth with better behaviors. Another way we can encourage better behaviors to grow is to focus on strengthening the relationship between you and your child. It becomes difficult to have a good relationship with our kids when we're constantly trying to put out fire after fire. So when we get in the routine of always reacting to the challenging behaviors, our kids begin to see us more in a negative light because we're using strategies that are not very positive. This is like trying to grow a plant where there is little sunshine or lack of water. The plant still may grow, but it's not going to grow very well. So we can promote better growth by finding fun things that you can do together to strengthen that relationship between you and your child. These things don't have to be complicated or cost money and can only take a bit of your time, like playing a board game together, or working on an art or science project, or having a paper airplane contest. Sometimes it can be as simple as asking some questions about the things that they're interested in, like the video games they're playing, apps they're using on their phone, or maybe a TV show that they like to watch. Next is to never underestimate the power of positives. Including positives in your child or student's day can make the difference between success and failure. Simple actions such as praise, attention, or activities that they enjoy is a wonderful way to encourage the behaviors that you want to see. Also, we can simply catch them being good. If you catch your child doing a behavior that you want to see, such as working on their homework without complaint, or helping set the table for dinner, or sharing with a sibling, provide large amounts of praise for this. Help them recognize that this is a behavior that you want to see and that they're going to get a lot of attention when they do it. Adding positives to your child's or student's day is like providing sunshine, water, and fertilizer to a hungry plant. Adding more positives will help boost the growth of those behaviors that you want to see more. And the more that those behaviors grow, the less room there is for the challenging behaviors. Finally, it can be helpful to reflect on your own behaviors because that can have a major impact on your child's behaviors. Think about what you're bringing to the table, such as the stress you're experiencing in your own life or how you're modeling that stress in front of your kids. It's not bad that your kids know that you might be experiencing stress. What's important is how they see you manage that stress. If caregivers are discussing the pandemic and the stress surrounding it, kids might be absorbing that stress, which may be contributing to their challenging behaviors. Instead, think about modeling calm behavior and productive ways to manage your stress, like working out or doing preferred activities. When your kids see you successfully managing your own stress, it's more likely that your child will copy your model. In addition, when your children are feeling safe and supported, it's going to make us as caregivers feel better because we're helping our children's behavior grow. Often, when reacting to our child's or students' challenging behavior, we use statements like no hitting, don't put your feet on the table, don't fight with your brother, and no swearing. We use these types of statements because it very, very clearly tells our child what not to do. However, instead of just telling your child what not to do, it can be just as important to tell them what to do. This way they can know what your expectation is and what behavior you are expecting them to do. If we don't tell them what to do, it can become a guessing game for them to try to read your mind on what it is that you're expecting from them. So how might this look? Instead of saying no hitting, you could say, keep your hands to yourself. Then this is very clear and your child or student knows exactly what is expected of them. Instead of saying, don't put your feet on the table, you could say, put your feet on the floor. Instead of saying, don't fight with your brother, you could say, share the iPad with your brother. And finally, instead of saying no swearing, you could remind your child or student to use nice words. Behaviors that you want to see are also called expected behaviors. Things like sharing with siblings, helping with chores, and doing homework are all expected behaviors. These are behaviors that we want to see our child doing. Unexpected behaviors, on the other hand, are behaviors that we don't want. For example, fighting with our siblings, tantrums, lying, and swearing. These are all unexpected behaviors that we don't want our child to be doing.
So what can we do to encourage these expected behaviors? We can first determine the why behind the challenging behavior. In other words, what is the child communicating through their challenging behavior? We provided many tips on how to identify what your child or student is communicating, such as paying attention to what happens right before or right after the behavior occurs. Pay attention to when and where the behavior occurs, and also consider outside factors that may be impacting their behavior, such as being tired, hungry, or having medication side effects. Once we have determined the why behind the child's behavior, we can make a plan. If your child does the expected behavior, they can earn what they want. If your child does the unexpected behavior, they do not earn what it is they want. Let's look at a few examples of this. Let's say we identified that the child is engaging in challenging behavior because they want the iPad. The want would be the iPad. The expected behavior I want to see is helping the brother with the dishes. If the child does help the brother with the dishes, he earns 10 minutes on the iPad. The unexpected behavior I don't want is complaining and throwing the dishes. If the child complains and throws the dishes, he does not earn the iPad. This plan is teaching the child that when you engage in the expected behavior, you earn what it is you want. Let's look at another example. We determined that the want behind the challenging behavior is the child wants a snack. The expected behavior I want to see is taking out the garbage. When the child does take out the garbage, he earns 1 cookie or unlimited carrots. The unexpected behavior we don't want is trying to sneak a cookie. When the child tries to sneak a cookie, they do not earn a snack. It is important to note that the things the child earns does not have to cost money. It can simply be making time for your undivided attention to them, playing their favorite game with them, or letting them choose the movie for the family night. We know that challenging behavior does not always communicate that the child wants something. It can also communicate that they don't want something. Here's what a plan would look like for if your child's behavior is communicating, I don't want to do my homework. The expected behavior is them finishing their homework. And if they finish their homework, they earn free choice of an activity before bedtime. The unexpected behavior is them throwing their papers and books on the floor. If they do this, they do not earn the free choice time before bed. Now, some of you may have some questions about, well, how on earth am I going to get them to completely finish their homework? That's impossible. This one can be difficult because how do we give them what they want, which is not to do their homework, and yet make sure that they're getting their homework done? In these situations, we try to think about the balance between where we are now and where we want to be. Right now, our child is not doing any homework, and all of our efforts is getting them to do their homework is resulting in a lot of conflict with no success. If we continue down this route, we're likely to see the challenging behaviors get worse and worse, and this is where we are. Where we want to be is at a place where they're doing all of their homework without complaint. To get from where we are to where we want to be, we may need to change our expectations from an all or nothing approach to an approach where we're just trying to find something that works, even if it's just a little bit of success. So we start to bridge that gap between where we are and where we want to be. We tell our child if they get one part of their homework done, they can have the rest of the night to do whatever they want during their free time. This can be a difficult concept to accept because we believe that our children should do better. But the fact is that they're not doing better and their behavior is communicating that there's a problem. And again, they are not getting their homework done now. This is a way to flip the switch from homework being something very negative between you and your child to something that is positive. And when things are positive, we can slowly work on getting our children to do more and more of their homework using positives. Maybe you notice a bit of a pattern as we have been talking about the steps to success. Most of the steps that we have discussed have had something to do with the word positive. This is because positives are the things that encourage growth in all situations. When we think about what plants need to grow, it's all about positives that encourage that growth. For plants, the positives are sun, water, and nutrients. The same is true for our children and students. If we want to encourage their behavior to grow, we need to provide the positives that will encourage that growth. For our children, the positives start with good soil, which is our relationships. When our relationships are positive and strong, we can plant the seeds for growth. The seeds we plant with our children are making sure they know what's expected of them and making sure that the environment is a place where these behaviors can actually grow. It is difficult for plants to grow in rocky soil and where there's very little rain. It is equally difficult for our students' behavior to grow when there's a lot of negatives around them and when they're not getting attention for doing the expected behaviors. The sun, water, and nutrients are us noticing and rewarding them for meeting our expectations. This can be a difficult thing to do when our children and students are having frequently challenging behaviors. When it becomes difficult to praise and reward them, remember it is the expected behaviors you are rewarding, and when you give your attention and praise to the behaviors you want to see, they will grow. We have covered a lot during our time with you, and it might be a little bit difficult to take in all that information. So here's a few things we feel are the most important things to take away from today's session. First, it is important to remember that behavior is communication. Challenging behavior is communicating that there's a problem, and our children or students are using that challenging behavior to tell us that they're having a hard time managing that problem. This is our opportunity to figure out what that problem is and teach them a better way to manage the issue in the future. Next is notice the good. Pay more attention to what your child is doing right versus what they're doing wrong. When we put less attention towards the challenging behavior and more of our attention and energy into what they should be doing, the things that are getting our attention will happen more often.
Also, have fun together. Sometimes it can be difficult to find activities to do with our children, but there are few things as valuable as finding some time to work on building a positive relationship. Again, these activities don't have to cost money. In fact, one of the best ways to find an activity to do is to learn about your student or child, is to figure out what they're doing to occupy their time when they're engaged in free activities, and look for ways to be part of those interests. For example, if your child is really into TikTok right now, ask them to show you their favorite video. Or if your child is really into Minecraft, ask them to teach you about it. Whatever they do is an opportunity for you to connect with them and let them know that you care. If what you're doing isn't working, try something different. Several years ago, my brother called me to ask me some advice about his teenage son. I asked my brother what it was that he wanted his son to do more. He said, keep his room clean. I asked him what his son enjoyed doing in his free time. He said, listening to music. So I told my brother to reward his son with some CDs of his favorite artists when he cleaned at least part of his room. My brother had a hard time with rewarding his son for doing something that he felt he should just be doing on his own. It can be difficult to think about providing rewards when situations are pretty intense. We're not always going to know what works, but when we know that nothing is working right now, it's worth your time to try something new, even if that means stepping out of your comfort zone.
Finally, sometimes doing something different can be a bit intimidating and frustrating if we don't see immediate changes in our children's behavior. If things don't work out right away, you can always go back to thinking about the why and see if there's more information that you need to learn about your child's behavior. You can also start simple in the beginning to help you feel more successful. So maybe focus on one thing at a time and give yourself some time to figure things out before taking on too much at once.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Behavior can be complicated, and what we covered today is not meant to solve every possible situation that you might come across with your children or students. What we really hope is that you were able to start thinking about behavior a bit differently, and hopefully that will give you some ideas on how to respond differently to challenging behavior. Again, this session has been recorded, so if there's anything that you want to revisit, you can access this presentation on the district's Prevention and Safety Parent Ed page. I think we have a little extra time, so if anyone has any questions, you can add them to the chat or the Q&A.
I just see one comment there. Thank you. Good stuff. Much appreciated. Thanks for being here, Christine.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Nicole. It was great information. Really appreciate it. I'm sure if there are additional questions, they will send an email or follow up. Feel free to email Joel or Nicole or I or Rachel at ISD 728. And we will try and respond to any questions that you might have. Thank you again. We really appreciate your time, and we hope these sessions provide you some additional support. Thank you.